Hello, everyone, and welcome to the regular town council meeting of April the 8th. I call the meeting to order at 7:01. We'll start with a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Curtis makes the motion. Is there any additions or deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next up, look for a motion to accept the minutes of our last regular meeting. Councillor Barry makes the motion. Is there any errors or omissions within the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. It's a big deal, you know. The auditor phoned me today and asked me if everybody was happy with the minutes. There's a whole bunch of new questions that auditors asked this time around. So I said, yes, we've all been very happy, not one complaint. Not one error or omission. Okay, so we have no supplement, no correspondence. We're going right to business. And acting as Director LaFave will be CAO Ling.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first request for council decision this evening is from Director LaFave's department. It is from the Agricultural Society, a road closure request. So the proposal is to approve the temporary road closure for the Agricultural Society parade route on Wednesday, August 7th. So the background, on March 22nd, 2024, the town of Vegreville received a letter from the Vegreville Agricultural Society requesting a temporary road closure for the Vegreville County Fair Parade. The parade will be held on Wednesday, August 7th at 11 a.m. Parade lineup will begin at 10 a.m. at the Vegreville Composite High School and will head east down 55th Avenue, turn south down 60th Street, and then east down 45th Avenue to finish at the Ag Society grounds. A follow-up conversation with the Vegreville Ag Society determined they are also requesting the town provide barricades and staff to direct traffic at those barricades. So the communication strategy, the temporary road closure will be communicated through the town's website and social media channels. So the recommendation is being made that Town Council approve the temporary road closure for the parade route on August 7th, 2024 from 10 a.m. until 12 p.m. and further that the Town Council approve the supply of barricades and staff at 20 locations to close the parade route to vehicle traffic. And the map is attached.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Barry makes the motion for the recommendation. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Warwick.
Obviously, this is the route they've used the last couple of years, but I think that at the beginning, I was a little skeptical just with that change because you're being used to seeing it go down the downtown, but I think it's worked very well. And I actually had the opportunity in September to attend a parade in a different community that had a similar unloading area as what we used to. Closer kind of down how our co-op was, it was similar. And I watched a little bit the struggles that they had, any of the entries with horses, and how then they were either having hard unloads or were actually then having to travel with the horses from a secondary location and seeing them drive through more of the town streets. So for all of those reasons, I think it's a kind of a good route and gives a lot of opportunity to unload the big equipment and turn it around without really impacting people that are walking on the streets.
Any other comments? Yeah, when it was first proposed during the COVID time, and I thought it would probably be temporary, but we haven't heard much from the business community downtown saying that they would like to see it back, and so I guess this looks like it's going to be the norm. Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. So next up, look at that, CAO Ling again.
Okay, the next request for council decision in front of you is the closure and deaccessioning of the Vegreville Regional Museum. So the proposal is to permanently close and establish an administrative directive for the deaccessioning of the Vegreville Regional Museum. As discussed at the April 2nd Legislative Committee meeting, the town of Vegreville will officially be closing the Vegreville Regional Museum. With a letter from the Honorable Tanya Furr, Minister of Arts, Culture and Status of Women, stating that the town of Vegreville has the authority to deaccession the collection of the Vegreville Regional Museum as it sees fit. The municipality can now create an administrative directive for dealing with articles at the museum. The process outlined at the last legislative committee meeting has now been incorporated into administrative directive. This directive will assist council and administration to reduce the inventory at the museum. Financial implications, the proceeds from the public auction will be used to offset the cost to the town for the expenses incurred during the disposal of the museum artifacts. The communication strategy for deaccessioning the museum is outlined within the administrative directive. So the recommendation this evening is that Town Council permanently close the Vegreville Regional Museum, and further, that Town Council approve the administrative directive for the purpose of establishing principles and processes for the deaccessioning and disposal of objects at the Vegreville Museum.
Okay, thank you. For a motion for the recommendation, Councillor Curtis makes the motion. Discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Rudick. You can start us up.
So this is a difficult decision that has been many years in the making, and it's caught the attention of some of the public more recently, but it has been repeatedly attempted with the encouragement of the previous society to form in different formats to be able to try to spur on the activity of a museum society in some format. I think it would be prudent, and I appreciate that there is a communication strategy here inside the administrative directive, just because I think it's unclear to the public who have now conflated some of the activities that are happening at the museum to be able to be clearly delineating the difference, for example, between the museum proper and some of the other collections that were previously housed together but operated separately, such as the Sports Hall of Fame, just because there is some confusion in the public. I guess the other thing, reading the guiding principles in terms of determining what items would be stored, how to determine the relevance and the heritage, as well as where the origin of the artifact came from, would be an important element in that determination. And I understand that there could be some outside information sought and guidance, because I don't, again, believe that most of us have the ability to determine one item over another. It would be very difficult for me, for example, to feel like I have any authority to be able to determine that. All that to say, there is some consternation as people have started to realize that this is officially closed or will be closed, even though it has been closed to the public since 2021 and was opened periodically during the corn maze, for example. So I want to, again, acknowledge the amount of work that Councillor Barry in particular has done to spur this along and make sure that council is continuing to be aware of the importance of the items held within our need to follow the provincial guidelines and move through this process. But we still have a few more steps to do. And again, I appreciate that guiding principles are here, and there is definitely a communication strategy to be able to share with the public. But those two things still remain for me, is being able to allay some of those concerns with the public and untangle the two different collections housed within the same building, Sports Hall of Fame versus the museum, and then also potentially seek some outside counsel in terms of which is the most relevant.
Okay. Councillor Lemko?
Yes, this has been a very difficult situation for, and a decision for this council over the past number of years. We've tried, and I say we, but more importantly, it was been Councillor Barry who's put his heart and soul into that museum, and tried as he might to get a committee established, a society established to run the museum, falling to deaf ears on the public. And now the public comes to us and kind of makes us feel like we took this decision without thought. But there's been a considerable amount of thought, and I want to say we'll do what's right at this time of how the pieces will be distributed or what's done with it. And again, I commend Councillor Barry for the amount of effort and the work he did to get that museum to try to keep it going. Unfortunately, we're here today voting to go with the policy that's put forth.
Okay. Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Worship. So as an individual, I don't want to close the museum. But as a councillor, I have to recognize that sometimes you have to vote in the manner that a councillor should vote when so many years have gone by at trying to keep it operational, but it was just by far too expensive. Throw out some numbers. Over the last 10 years of its lease, it cost well over $1 million to keep it operating. So it's not something that is cheap to try and keep running. It started out under the Historical Society years ago, and museums at that time were operated through volunteers. And when it was moved out to this facility, it continued to operate under volunteers. But then it switched to a museum society, and they wanted it to be an accredited provincial museum, so staffing started to become a major cost. The building is getting old, but the aspect is just to clarify, town taxes, the taxpayers have spent roughly $1 million trying to keep that thing open. In the next 10 years, you can believe that that cost is going to be there again. So as a councillor, I can't see that kind of investment going into something that's visited by so few. I have spent a lot of time at the museum. So to clarify a couple of things, first of all, the Sports Hall of Fame had its own society, its own board. It only had an occupation agreement with the Museum Society to occupy a small space in the back. The items that were there for the Sports Hall of Fame were never accessioned as part of the museum. They were totally separate. The Sports Hall of Fame Society dwindled down to approximately one person left and no capability of operating it, so the items were just sitting there and it couldn't keep running. So probably 6 years ago, it already was dissolving. And those items, we had no inventory of anything that was in the Sports Hall of Fame. So that's a different story. It is not the story that's going here now. We're now talking about the items that are accessioned in the museum, and they're totally separate. There's a lot of items out there, and we'll try and handle them as best as it is, just to try and clear some of the concerns about where did they come from, who did they donate, and et cetera. Every item has an accession story to it. It's there in paper. There's binder after binder after binder, so that every time an item was brought in, it was described as to what the item was, what the history behind the item was, and who donated the item. So that information is available to us. The biggest thing that has to be determined is if we're going to keep an item, where is it going to be stored? If we're going to store an item, why are we storing it? And if we're going to display an item, where is it going to be displayed? Because there's a lot of large items out there that'll be difficult to display, and there's a lot of small items. And there's duplicates out there. As I always joked about the 25 typewriters that are just sitting around in the back or upstairs, in the shelves, there's probably a dozen or more different tobacco cans. So what is required in terms of trying to deaccession it? But I think we have some directives here, and council can sit down with this directive and try and itemize and look at and consider what's best for the future. We still don't have our hands tied, but we have to make a move now, because Grant just leave this over and over. The agreement that was with the town and the museum expired in 2020, May of 2020. The museum was continuing to stay open even without a lease until COVID hit, in which made it impossible to have the museum open. During that time, discussions were being held, and finally in January of 2021, the Museum Society dissolved. By that time, the agreement with the town had also expired. So we ended up with a museum of artifacts sitting in a town-owned building, and we had to figure out, where do we go from here? Because technically, we weren't responsible. Technically, the municipality, in its mandates, has no obligation to run a museum. So we sought information, and the minister gave us some clarity by saying, under the circumstances, we have the power to deaccession the collection as we see fit. That now gives us the opportunity to move forward. So I guess I've said a whole lot. I keep saying it's a sad heart, but as a councillor, I have to vote to close.
Go ahead, Councillor Bullock. Thank you, Councillor Barry.
I'd like to thank Councillor Barry for his very good explanation to everybody, and I hope the public really paid attention to that, and I hope they take the opportunity to read through the administrative directive. I too am not excited about the closure of the museum. I got involved in the museum as well, and they were looking for volunteers, and they just couldn't get that kind of interest in the museum. So there is significant history to Vegreville and area in that museum. We are taking the steps to preserve what we can, but we have to go through the process. It just can't sit there idle without getting the care it actually deserves. So moving forward, it is a hard decision to make, but I too will be supporting the closure of the museum at this time, and following through this administrative directive. We'll be keeping an eye on how it's going and keeping the public informed of how it's going. Thanks.
Councillor Worley.
I'm not going to get into the logistics. I would say that nobody's more experienced than Councillor Barry on that. And there's been years of really diligent work to try and make sure that they were being responsible with taxpayer dollars. But I actually just would like to speak to the other side of it. I've had some really good conversations with people about things they'd like to see. And the reason I thought that was encouraging is what I saw from me was hope. I've seen a bunch of communities that, you know, have still what they're calling a museum. Whether to you a museum means the things within it or just means the building, those are different things to different people. But there's a lot of small communities that have a technical museum that haven't had a door open. To me, that's a loss of hope, to have a building that it's just stored in. And for the first time, we knew that it wasn't viable to continue forward for cost. We know that that building has already had some extreme problems, including some water issues and whatnot, that we weren't going to be able to just keep it as it was. But for the first time, because we have a direction, partially from the minister as well, but also due to some very diligent records, I see some hope of being able to put forward what I heard from people. So the conversations that I had was they didn't want to see things of high historic value be gone. They wanted to be able to showcase what made Vegreville Vegreville. And there is a miscommunication if anyone thinks that that hasn't been the intention, because none of us have ever said, let's find a way to get rid of every single item that we see and not display Vegreville. We're looking at a way to actually be able to display it because it's not being displayed right now. So I had some great conversations with a lady who approached me after a chamber meeting, and she talked about the want to see, maybe ways to display different cultures of past, present, and future of what Vegreville's starting to look like. And that was exciting because to me, administration had already proactively brought us some suggestions. So I just think people need to understand, keep telling us what you think. Don't think because we're saying we're making these steps and going that our conversations are over, because I think we are, for the first time, the deepest into conversation we ever needed to be. Now's the time for people to say where they'd like to see things and what kind of things they'd like to see, what you look at when you go into a town. I want to hear all of that because I think that's what's going to direct us. So I'm sad about the decision, but I actually feel a level of hope.
Excellent. Okay, well, just to get the facts here, I mean, Councillor Barry has spent, since the day that we announced to the museum board that we were no longer going to be funding their grant money. It's still our building, we still pay all the bills. First 8 years on council for myself, we were in excess of $1 million. The last year that the museum operated, the taxpayers of this town subsidized the visitors to the tune of $280 a visitor. And they measured a visitor by a buzzer at the door. So staff, town employees, everybody using that front door, that's what it cost in property taxes, $280 every time that buzzer rang in the last year of their operation. Something had to be done, and we could no longer fund the museum the way that they were operating it. They chose to dissolve, and then it got passed to us. Lock, stock, and barrel. Councillor Barry has tried his best to start a historical society and try to resurrect some form of a museum. I've seen some stuff on social media that says, I can't believe that the town of Vegreville is walking away from this. And other communities have. Other communities have friends of a museum, or the Ag Society is helping. There's not a lot of municipalities out there that are sponsoring museums today. And it's not fair to the taxpayers of this town to pay the bills on that facility and employees to have rooms upon rooms filled to the top with artifacts that they never said no to. What we choose through a process that we don't know quite yet how it's going to happen, but there is a lot of duplicates, 10-time duplicates out there that need to be moved. We will be in communication with the public. Councillor Barry is very correct about the documentation of what was donated. And the process of what we decide to keep, what we feel is important to this area, is going to be ongoing. And if there's somebody that in this community that feels that they would like to be part of that, by all means, come and talk to us. There will be public notification of when this process starts, and if you want to get on the list, we'll set something up. And if it's something that isn't deemed to stay at the museum, then you put your name forward, and if you're on the list and there's no other family member that is decided they want it, then by all means. There will be a sale at the end to try to cover some of the costs of this deaccession process that was forced upon us. So I like what Councillor Rawala had to say. There's some hope, because we would like to display some of these artifacts in buildings and how the future looks and what is going to be happening in Vegreville. And who knows, there may be room in that facility as we move forward for a much smaller display as that building now takes on a new role. But that's where it's at here, folks. And anybody thinks that the town just did this without any thought, think again. And some of the things that I've said on some social media posts, you better remember that $1 million in 8 years could have paved a lot of roads. That being said, we will be very public about how we move forward with this, and we will be advertising for a couple of weeks, and we'll make the best effort we can for the items that are not going to be saved put them back in the hands of the families that donated them. Go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the thought of hope, I've been hoping for a lot of years. A few years back, in about 4 years actually, when this started, we started talking about a new historical society. We advertised it, paper, radio, social media. We held it right here at the first meeting. We actually even had a screen up there and showed a nice bunch of pictures and et cetera, and we had 2 residents come. We waited a year, we worked on it, some of the staff in the town here assisted me, and we got an incorporation certificate so that it is actually a society. We advertised again, all of the different outfits. We held it at the center out at the museum. 3 residents showed up. So if there's hope out there, I have the letter written, ready to be stamped and sent to the registrar to turn back in and surrender the certificate of corporation for the Vegreville Regional Society, Historical Society, sorry. I won't send that for a little bit, because we'll just find out how much hope there is out there. Contact me. We can still set the society up, but it takes more than 2 or 3 people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And on the other note, regarding the sports museum, again, what went on there prior to everybody just dropping it and walking away, a lot of stuff was still in boxes in the basement, and we have moved some of the stuff to the arena. We've built all new cabinets at the arena, and there is a little bit of stuff left that's in a sea can, and we will be looking some other place to display that. Go ahead, CAO Ling.
Okay, just to touch on the Sports Hall of Fame, I too read the social media posts that are going around. As Councillor Warwa mentioned, the museum, the building itself is not without its issues, and we had a major flood. And unfortunately, the area that flooded stored a majority of the Sports Hall of Fame, the stuff that wasn't displayed, the stuff that was put down in boxes and everything like that. It all got extreme water damage, and then trying to dry it all out, everything got black mold. So everything that got damaged was destroyed. That was about 1/3 of the collection. As your worship has alluded to, there are new cabinets in the entrance of the arena, and we do have pictures and some sports memorabilia on display there. We also still have in the sea can, where everything was moved after the flood. There are still articles left. We have about 10 boxes, and then jerseys and everything like that that don't fit in the display cabinet. So we are still in possession of everything that was not destroyed or not damaged and then ultimately destroyed. So we still do have all that, the remaining stuff, yes.
And again, we have no record of who donated anything to that.
No, there was
The museum
there was
side after
extremely
this.
good paperwork on the museum side, but there was no paperwork on the Sports Hall of Fame side.
Go ahead, Councillor Rudick.
So, thank you for clarifying all the different elements of this discussion. I've got 2 more questions then. Can we be directing people to our Vegtown email to continue to direct the questions and that get collated in terms of directing people in the right way? And then the second question is about the Sports Hall of Fame collection, which is again not part of the museum deaccessioning process. Do you have a suggestion about how people can access that information, or who ultimately is responsible for it? Direct them to the Vegtown email as well.
Excuse me, anybody who has any questions regarding the museum or the Sports Hall of Fame, yes, please contact vegtown@vegreville.com. We are collecting, anything that comes in is logged, and we are hoping with the deaccession process of the museum side will all get answered. The Sports Hall of Fame side, we can look at. At this point, we're unsure what, the cabinets were purchased last year and installed last year, so they were just filled, and I'm unsure, there's been talk about rotating some stuff through depending on what it is, looking at other ways of storing, displaying some of that memorabilia, but if they have questions and if they're interested to find out if an article still exists, first of all, go look at what's in the display cases, and if it's not there, then send us an email at vegreville.com, and we'll see if it was one of the items that ultimately had to be destroyed, or if we still have it and we just are unsure what we're doing with it at this point.
Sorry, in follow-up then, if it's possible to have, those of us that are in town can be able to access that, to be able to go see the Sports Hall of Fame or to be part of the process of deaccessioning. If there are people that are looking to see what's on display or have access to that, I think the guiding principles that are listed in here in terms of the museum talks about display trumping storage, which is ultimately the point. It's to share what's there.
Yes.
And in that vein, again, trying to not conflate them, but they are being conflated for people. Sports Hall of Fame displays, is it possible to have that shared with the public? Like, is it something that is photographical?
Like the displays themselves, they're in the lobby of the arena, and the arena's open to everybody, so if they're not in.
If they don't live in Vegreville,
If they don't live in Vegreville, it's a little hard to go in there because everything's behind glass, so you start filming it and you have to, the glass and the lights play an issue. If there's something in particular that they can describe in detail or know exactly what it is, they can send an email, we can possibly take a look. But other than coming and seeing for yourself what's on display, it's a little tough there's quite a lot there.
Okay, thank you very much.
But that being said, we have no record of what was
don't.
ever there, who donated anything.
No,
The stuff that was spoiled is gone. The stuff that was probably no good is gone. So what we have is what's displayed there, and we have some other boxes that we plan on rotating through a collection, and we'll put up some more cabinets in some other facilities in the future. So there's really nothing left, and there's no history of who donated anything, really, for someone to say that they want something. Well, how would we ever determine who gave what? So, I mean, what is left is being stored, and what's on display now, and the rest is gone. So, I mean, it had to be dealt with. So, and again, like to have 3 people telling us they donated the same thing without any type of way to track it is. Anyway, it's not a good situation, but we are trying to do the best we can with what we were left with. So, any more comments on this? Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Next up, I will go with CAO Ling again. Review.
all right, the topic of this RCD is GOV 1013, civic recognition of the death of a current or former member of council policy. The draft civic recognition of the death of a current or former member of council policy was introduced at council at the legislative committee meeting held on April 2nd. This policy is designed to provide consistent services in the case of the passing of a current or former member of council. There have been no changes to the draft policy since initially presented to council. The financial implications: if passed, the town may incur the cost for 2 to 3 floral tributes if section 6.6 to 6.9 are activated. Further, if section 6.7 of the draft policy is activated, costs will be incurred in relation to commemorative services for venue up to $2,000 and catering up to $8,000. If necessary, these purchases will be made from goods purchased or services purchased of the council department budget. Communication, this policy will be communicated with all the members of the senior management team. This policy will also be placed on the town website. So the recommendation is that town council approve GOV 1013 civic recognition of the death of a current or former member of council policy as presented.
Okay, looking for a motion for the, Counselor Lemko. Any discussion? I know that we've talked about this at our ledge meeting, and it's nice to have a policy in place, jumping back and forth, and so now so nobody die right away, okay? You okay? Go ahead, Councilor Lemko.
I think for, for clarity on the financial implications, that under section 6.7 is the additional services offered for the death of a current mayor. Not all council or such or past council, it is the death of a current serving mayor for that 2,000 and the 8,000 for catering. Just for the community to know that's what goes under there in 6.7.
Is everybody okay with that? Go ahead, Councilor Bullock.
Can I lay the flag?
Don't worry, it'll be egg salad sandwiches, it'll be fine. Okay, any other comments? Again, like I said, it's nice to have some policies outlining on former councillors, mayors, and moving forward, so. Okay, well, no other comments, all those in favor? Great. Let's see who's gonna be next.
I think that might be me again.
Go ahead.
All right, the next topic is the GOV 1014 condolence and congratulations policy. At the April 2nd Legislative Committee meeting, administration introduced the condolence and congratulations policy to council. This policy will establish consistent practice when using public funds to wish condolences or congratulations. Council has reviewed and discussed the proposed policy. The policy being presented to council for approval has no changes to the original draft. The financial implications, flowers or donation in lieu not exceeding $75 will be purchased from each department's goods purchased. As indicated in section 6.2 of the policy, council may increase the amount spent or decide on a different form of recognition for special circumstances. Communication strategy, if passed, this policy will be communicated with all town of Vegreville senior management team, managers, and employees. This policy will also be placed on the town website. Recommendation is that town council approve GOV 1014 condolence and congratulations policy as presented.
Thank you. Councilor Bullock makes the motion for the recommendation. Any discussion? Councilor Riddick? Yeah.
I guess I could say the same thing I said at the legislative
Yes.
committee meeting. I appreciate that there's consistency, and having the policy in place allows us to recognize staff, both with the good times and the bad times. I think it's important if we had that as our strategic, part of our strategic plan, that we would put people as part of our core motivation, and making sure that we're acknowledging the parts of our staff and employees' lives that are both the best and the worst of times. To be a compassionate employer is something that's laudable, but difficult to do if we don't have a policy in place. So I appreciate that you've put some thought into it. The only thing that I am just questioning again, and this will rely on a bit of work from managers, is to make sure that they have a good idea of who their staff are, and that requires, I think a lot of our staff know one another, but as our employees change over the years, that having that personal relationship with their employees to be able to actually know that when these big events happen for people, it's not necessarily the first thing that people share, whether it's good news or bad news. So I guess thanks for the policy, and let's continue to be an employer of choice where our managers and our staff have good communication with one another to be able to share these. significant events in their life.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead.
Just, it was a clarification point similar to the one Councillor Lemko made, just because the overall policy talked about financial implications. But just to clarify on the congratulatory side, in the actual policy itself, flowers were not for the congratulatory side, they were only for the condolence side. Just because it may look like a large amount, but it is significantly small in a much different occasion.
Okay. All those in favor of the recommendation? Carried, thank you. Okay, CEO Ling, let's give you one more.
Okay, this topic, next request for council decision topic is policy GOV, excuse me, 1015, a full facility ban policy. Background on this, when members of the public behave in a harassing, violent, or unsafe manner in our town-owned facilities, administration has the ability to ban the offending member of the public from that particular facility. While it is a rare occurrence, there are times when administration will place a full facility ban on a member of the public. A full facility ban is put into place when the offense is violent in nature or an accumulation of ongoing behaviors that start to affect the daily functions of town staff. Full facility bans are not taken lightly and are discussed at senior management level to ensure that access to required services is not being denied to the offending member of the public. Following discussions at the April 2nd Legislative Committee meeting, administration has drafted a policy to ensure a full facility bans are dealt with consistently. The process now will include the distribution of a memorandum that will include a copy of the trespass notice and a photo, where possible, of the recipient of the full facility ban. This policy also clearly identifies all buildings and facilities to be included in the full facility ban, including the Vegreville Centennial Library. The communication strategy, copies of the trespass notice are sent to the banned individual, mayor and council, municipal enforcement, RCMP, and all department managers and directors. A separate memorandum, which would include a copy of the trespass notice and a photo of the banned individual, when possible, will be forwarded to all department managers and directors to be communicated with their employees. If passed, this policy will be shared with senior management, all department managers on the town website. The recommendation is that council approves GOV 1015 full facility ban policy as presented.
Thank you. For a motion for the recommendation. Oh, Councillor Warwell. You can speak to it first.
Okay. Just simply, I think that it's important to know that it takes a lot to get to the point of being a full facility ban, and the majority of the time it is based upon something having been of violent or extreme nature in which we have a safety concern for, at times, certain staff. But if we were to just suggest that it could be one area versus looking at full facility, my concern is that we could end up putting other staff members in a safety situation. No one staff is more important to us than the other. If we have put a ban in place for staff protection, everybody deserves to feel that we've taken that same step to protect them. So based upon that, that's why I believe that if it has gone to a point of a facility ban, we have to look at it being a comprehensive ban in that way. And when somebody has an extreme issue that's gone on, we may right away think of it being with certain departments, but that could be janitorial in a building that typically, somebody may inhabit for other reasons, but they're still in the building. So again, it just comes down to the fact that I believe our entire council would stand up very loud to say there's no staff member whose safety isn't equally as important.
Curtis.
Thank you very much. Just want to say thanks to admin for adding the notification side of things. I think that's very important and it reads very well. So again, keeping everybody safe. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Reid.
Thank you. This is different than previously our approach to facility bans, and I appreciate the consistency across facilities that, to Councillor Warwa's point, that no staff member is more or less important, because there are some situations where in the past we have not been able to provide the same level of approach depending on the decisions of the day. So I appreciate that there is consistency. and for clarity, 2 questions. The question that I had at our legislative committee meeting, you had explained in terms of sharing the information with the library board, which operates within a town facility, that they were supportive of this.
After the legislative committee meeting, I had a meeting with the library manager and their member of the Health and Safety Committee. And we discussed some of the issues around full facility bans and issues that are particular to their department and location. They are quite comfortable with the full facility ban now that we've had our discussions, and they've also sent a draft policy to the library management board, and they've all had an opportunity to review it before coming to tonight's meeting, and then nobody's had any issues with it at all.
And then my follow-up question is duration and appeal. There's no reference to time limit? So is this in perpetuity, that they're banned forever, or is there a cooling off period? Just because in the past, when I was on the library board, we did have to make that decision a couple times, and it was with a time limit and also an appeal process.
Full facility bans start off at 1 year.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the changes in the policy about how the notification's going to all the facilities, and it's gonna be a process that if it happens, that everybody's treated the same, so. No other comments? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Why don't you take a little break there now and so we're gonna start with council reports, and we're gonna start with Councillor Lemko.
Thanks, Your Worship. On April 2nd, I was, along with many members of council, at the plaque presentation for Plaza Taxi. Nice to see taxi services in our community to assist those people who don't have transportation. April 2nd, I also attended a ledge meeting. April 3rd, I was at MD Minburn Foundation Building Committee meeting with our project manager. We talked about the process for updating and getting our prime consultant, our procurement for a surveyor, and environmental assessment for phase 1. We reviewed the draft policy of the charter between the board and the project manager. Talked a little bit about our budget spending curve and how that looks as we move forward. And we did apply for a CMHC seed funding for $500,000, of which $150,000 is a grant and $350,000 is a interest-free loan. We meet again next week, every 2 weeks with the project manager as we go through this, putting the package together for submission to the government in September. Today's council meeting, Your Worship, and I have one other item I'd like to bring up. I did get a call from a resident of the community who wanted to pass kudos to our FCSS and how fortunate we are to have that team in this community because of the assistance they provide and in the manner they provide it. So kudos go out to Julie, as she was mentioned in this, along with the other staff. So it's nice to hear some positives in our community, that the residents feel that they're getting their, when they need to meet with a community member and our staff, that it's a positive experience. So kudos to you, Julie, and your team. Thank you for that. That's it, Your Worship. I'm done.
Thank you. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you very much. Pretty slim pickings for me here. March 27th, we had our council workshop, which is always fun and good. Not as many power tools as you'd think at a workshop, but April 2nd, ledge meeting, and then tonight's council meeting. That's what I got on the books. But upcoming here soon, Economic Development Conference that we'll be attending, so I'm looking forward to that. Try and bring some ideas back and learn from what others have done and see what's good and what's not. So looking forward to that coming up.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rudick.
March 26th, I attended the Ad Hoc Transportation Committee meeting. pilot project, and I'll let Councillor Bullock tell the majority of that discussion, but suffice it to say, really happy to be able to have volunteer organizations, a nonprofit business, and town representatives in a variety of facets being able to have these conversations to just sort of move this forward. And thank you to Leslie for being our staff on this project, because she's keeping us all on track and being able to submit on time applications to the appropriate grant funding that will be helpful for us moving forward. So thank you for that. March 27th and 28th was FCM table officers and executive committee meeting. That specifically, there's a number of different discussion points, but I want to say specific thanks to this council as well as other councils across the country. There have been some important discussions happening with the federal government to ensure that there was infrastructure investment coming up in the budget in 10 days, I guess, or less than that. Prior to this, there was concern that there was going to be $0 dedicated to the infrastructure that's important to each one of our communities across the country. And through this concerted advocacy, including resolutions like the one that was passed here, that's been increased to $6 billion. So that's not chump change. Some of it will be material to being able to support the communities and the housing that we're seeing as a need across the country, including right here in Vegreville. So some of the reinvestment to the Housing Accelerator Fund has been dedicated in there. There's a permanent transit fund, and then there's also specific infrastructure dollars dedicated to water and wastewater, which again, if anybody has ever lived in a house or apartment, they generally like to be able to turn on the taps, and they also like to be able to flush. So those are important parts of the work that we do every day. Core business for municipalities is making sure that we've got roads and the core infrastructure that we can't do with the current funding structures that we have. So I'm happy to see that it's going to be in there, and without dedicating funds towards municipal governments and local governments that make lives better for Canadians across the country, that doesn't happen. So thank you to council here. April 2nd, happy to be able to have most of council available to recognize Plaza Taxi, who is doing a great job of connecting people in the community, and he was able to take a break out of a busy day to be able to shake hands and get some recognition. They're amplifying what they're offering to the community, so we don't have some of the organizations that in larger centers that you might have, but we've got Plaza Taxi that will do the delivery of food and beverage and everything else in between, so glad to be able to have them and other local businesses provide that service to Vegreville businesses and community members. And everything else was the same as my council mates.
Just to point this is the Plaza Taxi people also purchase value the liquor store too.
I don't know that the purchase is the same. I believe they are working in consort with one another to be able to provide delivery services of all of the items. Yes, I believe the same owner of Casada is also the same owner as the adjacent business that is, sorry, I can't remember what the name.
Value liquor?
Value Liquor, yes. Those two are owned by the same individual. So they all work together really well and have been able to provide the service to Vegreville residents to have delivery, which is something that we need, and anybody that's living or outside of the community knows how valuable it is to be able to have access to the food and beverage delivery.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Warba.
Well, I was partially on international hiatus, so I just have a few items.
On your international file, you were
On the
working on.
international file, that's right. On April 2nd, I was able to come to the Ledge meeting as well as the Plaza presentation, and just to kind of echo what they said, very personable group. And so that's really nice to see. And then on the 4th, I had a chamber meeting and tonight's regular council meeting. From the chamber, I just have a couple things I wanted to highlight. As we discussed just really briefly, as it happened at the time of the Ledge meeting, the spring fling did not go ahead. They just had some lower numbers, so they'll look at what the next steps can be from there. They are working still a lot on the 50th anniversary, so in the form of looking at some grants and items moving forward with that as well. There was discussion about the job fair, and it sounds like everything obviously went very well there, but they also had secured a bit of a grant, and there's potential for them looking at doing a little bit of a fall session as well. During this process, they actually brought in some outside schools with busing, had them brought in, so I think it was really good. From my understanding, though, we did really well in our job fair because there seems like there was multiple job fairs going on at the exact same time. Probably a lot to do with Canada Summer Jobs. And, you know, everybody's starting to look into that planning process. Another thing they discussed, they will have the golf mixer, which will be on June 6th. And another item that actually I think is exciting, we've all seen the Chamber Bucks, and that program will be happening again. And they're up in numbers, and between what they're going to have with the Chamber Bucks program, as well as some that had agreed to come on more with the Christmas time program, they're up to 31 businesses that are taking part in that. They're going to be running a bit of a bingo program, so it'll do two things. There'll be one draw per business, so the winner is able to have the $25 gift certificate, which can then be spent in that business. It's a win-win for everyone, as well as the winner of the bingo, I believe at this time was set at $300. So I think it's a great initiative, and it's a good way to shop local. And, you know, there's some times where we don't even realize what we have in our own community in some of these small spots. So 31, I think that's really excellent to see. And that's kind of the primary that we have right now, other than there is a lot of plans. They're putting together a bit of a schedule for themselves as well, for outside parades to look to be able to take, you know, the chamber float, which is always good for us because it has the Pesinka and draws the name to Vegreville. And they did discuss a little bit an opportunity, if they do go to some outside communities, being able to spread awareness about the 50th anniversary, because we all know that takes a long time to plan, as well as they have ongoing efforts to continue to look for both grants as well as putting away some funding for the eventual refurbishment of the egg. And that's all I have at this time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bullock.
Thank you. Back on March 26th, the Ad Hoc Transportation Committee meeting. I'd like to jump into the Seniors Transportation Vegreville. We had a survey. So at the time, we had 81 responses. So I don't know how much that has increased. We'll find out that tomorrow at a meeting we're having tomorrow. It's one of the questions, what are the challenges do you have in transportation in Vegreville? 60% to the first question of the answer was it was too expensive, so they're having barrier to transportation that way. 38.8% responded they had no vehicle, and too expensive to pay for a handy van was at 30%, and 18% were other. Now question 4, where in town would you like transportation to get to? 75% were medical and 75% were grocery. Those are the two tops, they were tied. Pharmacy was 54.5, retail 48.1, and events was 44.2. One of the other questions was what transport, if Vegreville were to have a bus route, how often would you use it? 30% said all of the time, 26% said 3 to 4 times per month. So what transportation options were you currently aware of in Vegreville? Some people were aware of the coupon through VTSS. So that was a good thing there. So good conversation. Tomorrow that conversation will continue. Maybe we have more updated responses to that survey. But it was a pretty good response for the time that the survey was out. We were just kind of a limited time to get that out, and we got a pretty good response on it. And moving on from that, March 27th, council workshop, April 2nd, their legislative committee meeting, and 2 nights council meeting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to start out with a little bit of a fun day that I had with the Ag Society. I'm part of the corn maze, believe it or not, and we invited a number of the 4-H club because it was spring break. So a bunch of the kids came out, and a few of the mothers, and we put a challenge out to them. So they came there all prepared to make scarecrow displays. And they were quite imaginative as to what all they put together. So this year, throughout the corn maze, as we set up stations, you'll be able to go through and see some of these creations set up there that the kids put. And we want to try and encourage the kids to all come out and see their creations once they're set up and in the corn maze. And it was a lot of fun. And then just as a side for some of the younger kids that really couldn't get involved in that, they spent their time decorating and painting up about 50 rocks for us, for our Find a Rock. So they had a sloppy but fun time. So it was really quite enjoyable to see the kids come out. And we're hoping maybe that we can keep them involved in a few other different ways. It went well. On the 27th, the council workshop, the ledge meeting on the 2nd. And then on the 3rd, a little bit of a change of pace. St. Joseph General Hospital, our community board, periodically they have a new board orientation. So it was actually via webinar across the entire province for Covenant Health. And it was very informative. I learned some things that I didn't realize about Covenant Health and the history behind it. But it was also really nice because Tara Cusio, is our chair, invited us out to her farm place, and she provided us with a lunch when we got there, homemade bread, homemade cinnamon buns. It was very nice to just sit around and watch the webinar together as a board. And I'd like to thank her for stepping up and doing that, because it kind of helped our board come together, and we were discussing as to some direction that we want to go this summer, and we have a couple of ideas. And then tonight's regular council meeting.
Thank you. So the painted rocks are still drying, or what are they gonna do with those?
I'll be picking them up to take them back out to be with the rest of them. They were still a bit wet in the afternoon, so I had to leave them there to dry.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you all for what you do. So on the 26th of March, I had the Alberta Hub meeting in St. Paul. And we talked about what's happening with the Minister of Economic Development and Trade and Jobs over a 3-year period. The next 3 years, the REITs are going to end up with $0 in funding, and we're just trying to prove a point. We can't speak for every REITA, but our REITA is very active, and again, most members of government realize that. So hopefully we can come up with a formula here, or convince them that it's important, at least to northeastern Alberta, what we do and how we all work together in economic development here. So, okay, on the 27th, we had a Crossroads Economic Development, the new board that's put together with the County Minburn, Village of Innisfree, and Manville, and the town of Vegreville. And I'm pretty sure we're just about ready to launch everything over there. And there is a survey that's going to go, and we're going to collect as much information we can from the businesses within the county and the other municipalities. And there's offering some incentives to fill this survey out. There's a lot of businesses, the radio station, the newspaper, and other social media groups in town that are offering some prizes. So it fills it out, and once the information's collected, it'll be a good data bank for this whole area. So looking forward to that. We had the workshop on the same day, on the 27th, and then that evening I had a meeting with NATIGO, our subcommittee, working with the healthcare file for northeastern Alberta. So we've got a really good subcommittee put together there. We're meeting in the first of the month with all of the MLAs in northeastern Alberta and putting forth our proposal, what we think the Northeast, what we feel are the solutions for healthcare. And then we'll get after that, we're going to have a meeting with the Minister of Health, and we're trying to come up with the solutions built for the Northeast. So hang on to your hats. Tuesday, April the 2nd, I too was over at the Plaza Taxi, and it was nice to meet the owner of Plaza. I've met him a few times. I've used his services, but again, they seem to be all working together in the businesses over there, and hear nothing but good things about them. Then I had the Ledge meeting that day, and then on the 4th, on Thursday, the Economic Development Department, Jameson and myself met with a potential business that wants to come to town, and they're looking at a few buildings right now. We've assisted them as much as we could, and it looks very positive moving forward. On that same day, we met with our MLA and another potential business that's looking to set up in the park. And again, we'll have another meeting with them. And then on the 5th, we met up with another group we've met with a couple of times now again, and the meetings are going very well. And then on Saturday, I met with a bunch of concerned citizens that belong to a Bearland Condo Association, and we had some conversation about what they think their subdivision looks, what their needs are, and what they have an ask of the town. So I'm going to get some information, and hopefully we'll have something by the Ledge meeting that we can all have a discussion about. Today, I had a meeting this morning with Minister Dreeshen and most of the members of Natigo in the Northeast regarding Highway 28, and it was a very positive meeting, and how that's looking, how that project is moving forward. People don't realize to take on something like twinning and passing lanes, the land that needs to be bought and borrow pits to build highways with and stuff. It's a big project to manage, and when it was all said and done, just having some more communications with the provincial government about how that looks moving forward was really good. This afternoon, Jameson and myself and Michelle from the tourism manager met with the new board of the Vegreville Kinsman Golf Course, and we looked at some of the challenges that they see there right now, and we've offered our assistance in a few different ways, and we're going to help them try to research some possibilities on some grant applications. And it was just nice to see they had a full board, and they got a new manager. We met the new manager today, Lisa, and we painted inside. They've got some new tables. They fixed it up. They got 3 large screens in there. They have a new kitchen. A business, the same people that are at the arena, have now taken on the kitchen at the golf course, and they're already lining up some tournaments here right now. They definitely need some help in some direction, some advertising, and luckily that Jameson and Michelle are able to help out with some of this stuff. And they'll probably need some in-kind work from the town as we move forward, but they're nice to see them up and running again. And tonight's council meeting. So that's what I have. Does anybody else have anything else for council? Well, seeing none, I see we have 3 pieces in closed session today. All disclose is harmful to the economic interest of others. So I would take a motion to go into closed session. Councilor Rudick makes the motion at 8:09. All those in favor? Carried.